Okay, so a lot has transpired since the first video. Uh, it's hard to know where to begin or what to focus on because uh, now the US narrative has escalated, and I obviously have a emotional stake in both Italy and the US, and so things are getting more and more. To continue with what's going on here in Italy, is the lockdown is uh, more serious than I had realized initially. Uh, it's more or less a total lockdown, and we're supposed to stay indoors the whole time. Uh, you're allowed to go to work in some cases, to the grocery store, and to the pharmacy, is what they say. And you're supposed to have this thing called the auto certificazione, which is a auto certification, which declares that you're going to one of these three places. But it's really unclear if you need it to go to the grocery store. But at the same time, there's the threat that if you don't have it, that then you can either get a fine or go to jail for 3 months. And it's very confusing. Everyone is just confused, and no one quite knows what the rules are. And so, I don't know if I'm supposed to sign this certificate so I can go to the grocery store. On that note, I have had several people ask me about the toilet paper situation, and it is in fact fine here. Uh, that that kind of extreme preparation, if you will, hoarding of like wipeouts of things like toilet paper and such, is a little bit more of a phenomena in what I'd call Anglo-Saxon countries. I know that's not the right word, but it'd be like the UK, the US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Although I feel they don't really do that as much in Canada, but I don't know. We did have a bit of that with masks and hand sanitizer a couple weeks ago, and people trying to scam people for it. So it's there, but in terms of things like water and supplies and things like that, it's not quite as extreme here. And there's, I want to say, plenty of toilet paper right now. What else? It's been a little tricky for me because, separate from the official quarantine, I was kind of making a joke with my flatmate about my natural tendency to not leave the house in general, nothing to do with diseases or anything like that, but I do tend to stay home quite a bit, more than the average person. And so I was in a mix of, for my normal habits, and then actually when the coronavirus was first sort of getting spotlighted in Italy, and even friends of mine were sort of like, blowing it off and stuff, there was something about it that kind of, a little flag went up in my head. And I'm generally not an alarmist, and I don't believe in get into like media hype or anything like that, but something did wave for me. And so I was taking extra little precautions. I wasn't going out quite as much, and trying to keep a little bit of distance, and sort of already washing my hands and taking extra vitamin C and resting a lot. And it's been really interesting psychologically what's gone on since the actual decree and the lockdown, where now everybody is freaking out. And, we weren't in the original red zone that they were trying to close down, but ever since we went on lockdown, everyone is sort of panicking, as though the disease all of a sudden arrived and that we're going to get infested straight away here in Torino. And I just don't think that's the case. I have been watching the numbers these past few weeks. I guess it's actually been two. I don't know. Let's say the past few weeks. and noticing the patterns and where it's been increasing and stuff. And as I mentioned before, I was kind of surprised that Torino wasn't getting hit harder, and I sort of still stand by that right now. I do think it's not a bad idea about the lockdown the way it is right now, because I'm mixed. I think in the red zone, absolutely. But if you keep looking at the numbers and the statistics, the area where they originally were trying to contain and do a lockdown is where the deaths are happening. And in the other areas, it's kind of how it was before. So I feel a little bit mixed about this because of, like in any place, this isn't exclusive to Italy, it's sort of the politics involved, and also just the way laws are decreed to begin with, which is separate from the coronavirus. Just there's sort of an Italian way of doing things that sometimes is sort of like, okay, it doesn't always carry the best logic. It's not always thought out beyond kind of an immediate like response. At the same time, the lockdown's supposed to be till April 3rd, and I think starting March 25th is when certain things are going to be allowed to reopen, like bars and restaurants and gelaterias and pizzerias. So there's an awareness, I think, that you can't, it's a bit of an extreme thing right now, especially in terms of economics and commerce. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I do think that the lockdown in Italy has created a wave of panic, obviously, throughout everywhere in the world. And I think we are riding between both realities. I absolutely am standing. I think it's great that the U.S. is taking precautions, and places are closing down and universities are shutting down and people are getting into hand washing because of the circumstances in the U.S. about what we have in terms of a leader who is business as usual, and funding and that the incubation periods and the kind of concept of it's better to be safe than sorry. And I very much stand behind that right now, because that is what kind of struck me to begin with when it did hit Italy stronger initially. Was, again, I think what everyone's saying, there's the coronavirus itself, and of course the elderly and the compromised populations, but it's the spread of it that and the speed of it is really something to have your antenna up about, as you know. And and all the implications with that. Again, economically, I do want to say this, is that I know, especially in the US right now, there's a lot of, no, especially in the US, also in Italy, there's a lot of panic about finances and what's going to happen with that. I do want to say that Italy never fully recovered from the 2008 financial crisis, so it's tricky. It's really kind of unknown here, but the US did recover. And so for those of you there, I just want you to sort of, take a moment and sort of find something calm inside of this. So for me right now, it's the second day, and again, just more news keeps coming in every day, like the new bans from flying and into the US from Europe, and every day there's something new, and it keeps kind of growing. But at the same time, I think it's going, I don't know what to say, actually. I personally still feel okay and calm enough, and that there's a perspective, and this is another piece of something bigger, politically, environmentally. I don't know if people realize also that the uh, along with the economic side of things, that China had to close down factories that were affecting the production of other things. And so this first wave of that economic thing is also to be felt. And like there's so many things going on about being in a global system and a global world, and what that means, and these through lines, which is also part of why the spread is happening the way it is. So it's it's it sucks. I mean, it's tough times, and at the same time, there's also a lot of things that are being postponed, being canceled. In the other sort of picture, it's not the end of the world, um, but it is signifying a lot of things. I kind of encourage everyone in the midst of all the panic, to sort of take pause and keep putting things in a certain perspective. It's